A few months ago, I'd never touched an Android device from Anbernic. It wasn't that I thought that they were unclean or anything, but there wasn't really anything out there that I'd wanted to get or could afford to get, because all of their Android devices were on the expensive side, and there always seemed to be something out there that was either more powerful or more interesting. And when you're running a channel like this and you've got to get, multiple units, sometimes several in 1 week, your budget can't really stretch to that. I mean, to be fair, my budget can't stretch to a real chicken nugget, let alone one that you can play games on. And then I got the RGDS, and that sent me down a hole like Alice chasing a white rabbit, looking at a bunch of Android devices from Anbernic. I got sent the 477H from an incredibly kind reviewer. I'm going to do a review about that soon because it really does deserve a spotlight on it. And I also picked up the 477V as a bit of a Christmas present to myself because the idea of a vertical handheld with a 4x3 screen that was powerful enough to play GameCube and PS2 games was really exciting to me. What can I say? I don't get out much anymore. And then Mech DIY sent me this Anbernic 477M, the little metal handheld that could. Considering the price of this thing, it's been wildly popular, and people who've bought it actually seem to really like it. The one that I've got here is the 12GB model. I think the 8GB one's been discontinued or you can't get hold of it. Honestly, 12GB is probably overkill for the sort of games that you'll want to play on this. But as always, it's very nice to have, since that also gives you a boost in internal storage. And this device is actually quite powerful. It can handle some Switch and GameHub games as well, but personally, I wouldn't play those sorts of games on this device. When I first opened the box, the thing that immediately struck me was the weight. I was expecting this to be really heavy. I mean, this is a metal-bodied machine. I was expecting something that felt like an overly technological paperweight. But after a few weeks of actual use, that weight actually became oddly reassuring rather than a burden. To give this a good run for its money, I've put aside my AYN Thor, which has been my daily driver since I got it, and I've been using this almost exclusively. And I've had a phenomenal time with it. But what surprised me the most is how I wanted to choose this device over some of the alternatives that I've got lying around here that are technically more powerful and more versatile. There is something about the combination of the screen and the form factor that kept pulling me back. And I don't think that that's just because I'm a Doctor Who fan and this is the same colour as a Dalek. And much like a Dalek, you would think that the 477M could become the supreme power of the universe. After all, it doesn't feel fear. It treats obstacles as problems to eliminate, and it has an unshakable unity of purpose. Although it often can't play Unity games. But all of that comes with some glaring flaws. There are issues with this device that even the Doctor couldn't heal, although Gamma might be able to. Are these reasons why you would choose a completely different console? Well, that's what we're going to be taking a look at in this video, and finding out whether the 477M is a superior being, or whether it should be exterminated. Before we begin, I need to let you know that Mech DIY sent this over for review. No money's changed hands, and they don't have any editorial control over this video. If they did, it would have been out a couple of weeks ago. All opinions are my own. That is my crime. It is also my punishment. The Anbernic 477M has a proper metal construction, which I think you feel as soon as you pick up the device. This is CNC machined aluminium, the same sort of thing that you would find in the brick hammer, and I have to admit, I've a little bit of a soft spot for these hard shells. You might think then that this console would have the density of a collapsed star, but actually it's nearly 100 grams lighter than the Odin 2 Portal or Mangmi Pocket Max, about 40 grams lighter than the Odin 3, and about 30 grams heavier than the Retroid Pocket 6. So it doesn't really feel heavy at all. What we've got here is a MediaTek Dimensity 8300 processor with 12GB of LPDDR5 RAM and internal storage of 256GB. You've got a 4.7-inch LTPS display that runs at 1280 by 960 resolution with a 4:3 aspect ratio and 120Hz refresh rate. You've also got a 5300 mAh battery with USB-C charging, and it supports 27-watt fast charging. Connectivity comes via Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3, and I'm very pleased to say this has got a 3.5mm headphone jack. The microSD card slot can handle cards up to 2 terabytes, and all of this is running Android 14 with Anbernic's own RG launcher. Although I've got to say, the stock software on this is awful. You've got outdated emulators, poor launcher design, and some Android games that just don't work at all with it. The best option is to install everything yourself, although I know many just want something that they can pick up and play. Sound too is a bit of an issue. You've got these downward facing speakers, and whilst the sound quality isn't that bad, it does lack a little bit of bass and it isn't all that loud. But these are both minor issues and not insurmountable, especially if you're installing something like Gamma OS, which fixes a lot of problems. I will be taking a look at that in a different video. The build quality though feels excellent, which to be fair you would expect from CNC machined casings. There's no creaking or flexing. There's no uneven or sharp bits of metal that are going to cut you when you're least expecting it, or ill-fitting controls. And these metal cases do feel decidedly premium. For a similar sort of price point, you're looking at the Odin 3 or a Thor, all of which are fine bits of kit and put together incredibly well. There's just something about a metal body that just, I don't know, it just feels better when you're playing. It's so much more refined. And I'm not just talking about the smelting process. And of course, this is one of the few higher end devices that doesn't have an all glass front. Now, I'm ambivalent on the glass front debate. I've got to admit, there seems to be a benefit here. Sure, if you're going to drop this thing, it might scratch, it might dent, the screen is still unprotected, but it's not going to shatter in the same way as the glass fronts do. And if you do want to be extra careful, the device comes with its own TPU case, something that some other manufacturers would charge you extra for, even when they do have those all-glass fronts. But that metal shell can be both a positive and a negative, as we've seen with the brick hammer in the past. The metal does conduct heat like an air traffic controller on crack, conducting the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. Higher-end emulation sees the device getting noticeably warm. It's not hot enough to burn, but it can become slightly uncomfortable if you're particularly disposed to that. You'd think then that having a good cooling system would be a must-have on a device like this, and indeed, when it's on low speeds, it's barely audible. At maximum speed, however, it does develop a high-pitched whine, much like a wasp complaining to customer services. Luckily, you've got quite a lot of control over this now, and in a recent update, Anbernic have added a cool mode option that offers better balance, as well as a custom fan curve, so you can set this up to your liking. Some people have gone so far as to applying lithium grease or removing the mesh in front of the fan, but I've found that if you're sitting in for a couple of hours of gameplay anyway, those few seconds to change the settings aren't too onerous. I really like the controls here for the most part. Anbernic does something with their D-pads, at least in this unit and the 476H, which makes for really lovely playing. It's responsive, it's tactile with the right amount of resistance to prevent accidental inputs. Not only does this pass the Kirby pancake test, I think it would pass the entrance exam for Oxford if you asked it to. This is genuinely one of the better D-pads that I've used in this system, and I was a bit disappointed that it didn't carry across to the 477V, but that's for a different video. The face buttons are really nice too. They're rubber membrane with a nice amount of travel, and they're very responsive. Your thumb naturally falls in the spacing between the buttons, and it just feels right. It's especially nice when you're playing fighting games, although I have to admit I'm not a big fighting game person, so I can do with all of the help that I can get. You've got Hall effect analog sticks with the standard Anbernic caps. Some people might find these a little bit small. They're actually about the same size as the AYN Thor and Mangmi Air X. The stick caps are slightly convex as well, which some people are going to find less comfortable. Luckily, these can be changed out easily. I like them. They've got a smooth movement to them. They have a nice range and enough resistance that inputs feel deliberate rather than twitchy. For games using dual analog control, the layout works fine. I know some people would prefer an option with the left stick on the top, or more inset sticks perhaps, but I've just not found that too much of an issue. The only letdown here, though, is the trigger and shoulder buttons. Not only are these quite clicky, but they are inline as well. And whilst I don't find these unnatural or uncomfortable, you are straying into the realms with this device of playing games where analog inputs matter. And you just don't have them here. The irony is the 476H does have stacked analog triggers, and yet it's slightly less capable of playing the sorts of games that would need them in the first place. The great Anbernic giveth, and the great Anbernic taketh away. Some smart and technical souls have found ways to mod their units to add stacked triggers, which apparently solves the problem. I haven't attempted that myself, as it means opening up the console, and I am worried that if I do that, I'll fry it like a Kentucky chef in the seventh circle of hell. But my overall experience with the device is that not only does it feel nice and comfortable, but actually I like the controls. But the standout feature of this is the LTPS panel. This thing's got a resolution of 1280 by 960 and a 4:3 aspect ratio with a 120Hz refresh rate. And those specifications translate to an experience that makes retro gaming look incredible. There's something special about this panel. When I'm playing it, I don't even mind that it's not OLED. All of my OLED devices are sitting in the back room having a conversation at this moment saying, what are they going to do? Are they going to go on strike if panels this good keep coming onto the market? The major benefit here is that it's a 4:3 aspect ratio. You know, I'm happy to watch old episodes of Doctor Who on TV with great big bars at the sides of the screen, but when I'm holding a device, it doesn't feel quite as natural. It feels penned in. With this 4:3 device, the games fill the whole screen. It feels lovely and gorgeous and big and immersive, and that's the experience that I wanted to have, because otherwise games feel a little bit cramped. Not only that, but the power of this Dimensity chip and the 120Hz screen means that you can mix things like higher powered shaders with black frame insertion and get the best CRT-like experience on the market. And the brightness is really good as well. In normal day-to-day play, I've got this set to around about 50%. And if you want to go outside, you can push that all the way up and you'll be able to play. Maybe not in super direct sunlight. I haven't tested that out. We don't get direct sunlight here. We've got to have it shipped from China, and 4px is quite slow. But certainly on a bright autumn day, I am not straining to see this screen. Performance-wise, this is using the MediaTek Dimensity 8300, which is Anbernic's most powerful chip to date. For everything through to PSP, performance is flawless, although any 16:9 systems are going to look flawed because of the letterboxing. Sega Saturn actually runs pretty well here as well. It's not perfect because Saturn is a particularly demanding system to emulate, but it is a lot better than I've seen in some other places. This device is technically powerful enough to play some Switch and GameHub games, although I wouldn't really advise it for that 16:9 issue. Once you get beyond Nintendo Wii, systems start using 16:9 exclusively. The major benefit of this device is the 4:3 screen, and that suddenly is gone. But for everything below, you're playing with a system that can just emulate all of these things, but it's also got enough raw power in it to break through a lot of the problem issues with Mali GPUs and higher-end emulation. And that means running things like HD texture pack or shaders is actually viable on this system. In fact, I've got Kingdom Hearts running for the PS2 with HD texture packs, and it has been a glorious experience so far. I've tested quite a few games on here, and I found that things like F-Zero GX, Burnout 3, Ratchet & Clank, Metroid Prime, they're all working really, really well on these specifications. 2x resolutions works perfectly on the 1280 by 960 display, and the image quality is absolutely excellent. In fact, on some GameCube and PS2 games, you can even push this up to 3x resolution without feeling the strain. You do occasionally have to make the odd tweak here and there, or change the graphics driver from Vulkan to OpenGL, but by and large, this is pretty much pick up and play. I had a very similar experience with Wii. The only problem you might run into is that certain games only run in 16:9, and whilst they're perfectly playable, it's not always the best experience. The battery in this is pretty good as well. It's a 5300 mAh battery and charges in about 90 minutes. On higher end emulation, you can play somewhere between 3 and 7 hours. If you start throwing high end shaders on some of the retro games, you'll get between 8 and 10 hours, which is pretty good. It's pretty solid, really. So what we end up here with is a very powerful device, which is almost perfect for playing GameCube and PlayStation 2 and everything below. And I actually think that that is pretty special. There's a phenomenon with well-designed devices where the hardware essentially disappears during use, and you just start focusing on the game and the experience and the immersion. And this achieves this more consistently than many of the handhelds that I've used for 4:3 content. And that really matters to me. And after a few weeks of use, what really keeps pulling me back to this device isn't a single specification, it's how everything combined pulls together to feel like it's been specifically designed for the games that I want to play. You can talk about the raw power of the Odin 3, or the ability to play Switch on Thor, or the dual screens on the Thor, or the Retroid Pocket 6 and how great that is with the 8 Gen 2. It kinda doesn't matter to me. The 477M doesn't make sense at all if all you want is maximum performance at a specific price point, but it absolutely makes sense if what you want is a premium experience for the entire catalogue of 4:3 aspect ratio games. Think about what you're getting here. On the PS2 alone, the largest regional catalogue, which I believe is the PAL catalogue actually, has around about 2,800 titles. And you can have all of those running at a 2x resolution in a device that you can put in your pocket, as long as you have a particularly sturdy belt. And it's not just PS2, you've got over 500 GameCube games to choose from, over 1,000 PlayStation 1 games, 300 N64 games, thousands of Super Nintendo, NES, Sega Genesis, arcade, and much, much more. We think of retro gaming as anything which is about 2 generations back. There's a particular corner of retro gaming which is everything with a 4:3 aspect ratio, and that catalogue of games you can fit on one of these devices and you can carry it around everywhere you go. Maybe not every single game from every single system, but you have the potential to play all of these on here. And with something like this, why wouldn't you? And that's what I think anyway. And I would love to know what you think in the comments below. It has been a really wonderful time playing around with this system. I've still got to review the 476H and the 477V as well. My poor Thor and Odin 3 are sat on the side completely unloved, because these things have just given me that spark of excitement that makes me want to pick up and play some games again. But I'd love to know what you think. Do leave your comments about this device in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And whilst you're down there, if you wouldn't mind, why not click on the button that says subscribe and leave a little like as well. Every little helps. But that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and until next time, don't forget to play your games like they're going out of fashion. Happy gaming.